Hi, and welcome to our talk on our paper, It's the Company, the Government, You and I, User Perceptions of Responsibility for Smart Home Privacy and Security. This paper is joint work with Julie Haney and Susanne Furman from the National Institute of Standards and Technology, and myself, Yasemin Acar from Leibniz University, Hannover, and the Max Planck Institute for Security and Privacy. Smart home devices are commonly used for attacks by malicious entities. Privacy violations or failures to adequately protect user privacy often make the news. And users struggle to configure their smart home devices. A question often asked in research is, how can we help users better configure smart home devices so that their security and privacy can be better protected? However, we've also seen that users may be unable to learn to do this because of non-existent controls, and also because options are often limited. So in our research, we go beyond what can users themselves do and ask a different question. In this research, we ask the question, where do users see responsibility for smart home security and privacy? And second, what's the relationship, if any, between perceptions of responsibility, concern, and taking mitigative action? So let's get a quick overview of our methods. For a qualitative sample of 40 interview participants, we aim to recruit diversely across gender and ages, primary users and secondary users. For this, we used a recruitment firm. Participants qualified for our interview if they had at least 2 smart home devices. We ended up with 32 administrators and 8 secondary smart home users. Our semi-structured interviews were conducted in person by 1 or 2 interviewers and lasted on average 41 minutes. We asked questions about concerns, mitigations, and responsibility for smart home device security and privacy. All 3 authors then conducted the qualitative analysis. We read and annotated the transcripts, developed a code book, coded the transcripts, developed themes around responsibility, and discussed implications grounded in our data. For our results, I'll hand over to Julie.
We asked our participants about their privacy and security concerns related to their smart home devices. About 2/3 voiced some kind of concern, for example, fear of others getting audio or video access, or concern about hacking being a threat to physical safety. We also asked what type of actions they take to address their concerns, if any. With the exception of a few more advanced mitigations implemented by technology-savvy participants, most mitigations were simplistic or non-technical in nature. For example, the most frequently mentioned mitigation was setting a password on the companion device app. Despite participants having security and privacy concerns, we found that concern didn't always translate into action. For many, smart home ownership was viewed as a trade-off. Although participants knew there were privacy and security issues, they were willing to accept the risk for the benefits the devices provided. Others didn't know if or how they could take any action. Some did not have the knowledge to take action, which was especially true with security, or they didn't know what options were even available. There was also a sense of resignation that data is already out there via other means, like social media, so it doesn't matter what they do with their smart home devices. We asked participants who they thought was responsible for the privacy and security of their smart home devices, which is the focus of our paper. They also expressed views related to responsibility during other questions throughout the interview. For example, when initially asked what general hesitations or concerns they had about the devices. Participants' responses primarily fell into 3 different categories: users, in other words, personal responsibility, manufacturers, and government or regulatory bodies. Many times they viewed responsibility as being shared among some combination of these. 18 participants claimed at least partial responsibility for privacy and 28 for security. We found 3 views of personal responsibility. First, some viewed taking responsibility as holding themselves accountable for accepting risk. As one participant expressed, if you don't want your stuff exposed, you shouldn't have those devices in your home to begin with. Others took responsibility as a justification for inaction. They accepted personal blame for their own perceived deficiencies, such as not taking the time to learn what options are available. One participant who accepted personal responsibility didn't take mitigative action because, as he said, I'm not going to educate myself on network security. I'm very accepting to the fact that it is what it is. Finally, for some, responsibility means taking an active role. As one participant said, I feel like the default is always full access, so you have to really look for and pursue stricter settings. Manufacturer responsibility was the most frequently mentioned response, with 28 saying that manufacturers were at least partially responsible for privacy and 30 for security. We observed an attitude that manufacturers have an obligation to protect consumer security and privacy. It was an unstated manufacturer-consumer contract put in place at time of device purchase. As one participant said, they, the manufacturers, need to do everything since they're taking so much money for all that. Yet there were varying levels of trust of manufacturers. Some participants do trust them based on things like company reputation, and sometimes they felt it was in the best interest of the company to implement strong security and privacy. As one participant said, if they have a bunch of massive security breaches, people are going to stop buying their products, so our interests are aligned there. However, others, while believing manufacturers should implement adequate security and privacy, were not certain they would or could. As one person said, I don't have much trust in what companies say they collect and don't collect. I think they collect what they can and use it. 15 participants mentioned the government or regulators as being responsible for smart home privacy. Only 5 thought the government was responsible for smart home security. A participant saw government regulation of smart home privacy as being a consumer safety issue and said, there's other safety precautions put in other industries. I don't see why that shouldn't be something applied to this industry as well. One participant didn't think the government would do the best job, but felt that regulation had some benefit. She said, we've got to do something to protect people's information, or at least make them more aware of what exactly is being utilized and sold. Finally, over half the participants viewed responsibility as being shared between some combination of users, manufacturers, and the government. For example, one participant viewed responsibility as being shared between the manufacturer and himself. And he said, I'd like to see the vendors take more responsibility and take more action to secure their own devices. But because they don't always do that, and I don't always necessarily trust them to do that, I take it upon myself to be responsible for the security of these systems. Now for the implications of our research, I'll turn it back over to Yasemin.
Thank you, Julie. We see opportunities for improvement with and in the interactions between users, manufacturers, and government or third parties. Users can make risk-based decisions that protect data, devices, and the home network. Manufacturers can make sure that they implement privacy and security by design and meet standards and regulations. Governments and third parties can coordinate guidance and enact security and privacy policy and regulation. Talking about interactions, users can inform manufacturers about their challenges and perspectives on security and privacy. Manufacturers can listen to users, provide usable controls, transparency, and tips. Users can also inform government and third parties about challenges and share their perspectives, where those have to listen, inquire, and provide assurance and education. Finally, manufacturers can participate in guidance development, working closely with government and third parties who can provide standards, guidance, and regulations to manufacturers. To summarize, we talked about the responsibility for smart home security and privacy, where in a qualitative survey of 40 smart home users, we identified that users think that responsibility for smart home security and privacy is shared by users, manufacturers, third parties, and government, and that there are opportunities to do better when these parties collaborate and support one another. Thank you, and we're ready to take questions.